In this example, we need to find the domain of f of x equals the square root of 4x plus 20, and we need to write the answer in interval notation. Quick review. What do we mean by the domain of a function? The domain of a function are all the real values of the input variable x for which the output variable f of x is real. So are there any circumstances where I do not get a real number when I take the square root of a quantity? Yes, if the quantity underneath the square root is negative, the square root of a negative number is not a real number. So to find the domain of square root functions, this is the method we use. Notice this is for square root functions. So to find the domain of a square root function, we set the radicand greater than or equal to 0. Well, the radicand is the fancy name for the expression that lives underneath the square root sign. So if I do that, it ensures that the radicand is never negative. This means in our case, I'm going to take my radicand 4x plus 20 and set it greater than or equal to 0. Now I have a simple linear inequality, and how do we solve those? We solve them exactly the same as a linear equation with two exceptions. If I multiply or divide my inequality by a negative number, it will reverse the inequality symbol, and if I interchange the two sides of my inequality, that also reverses the inequality symbol. So I want to get x by itself on the left, so I'm going to subtract 20 from both sides. Adding and subtracting doesn't change the inequality symbol, so I'm going to get 4x is greater than or equal to negative 20. Now to get x by itself, I need to divide both sides by positive 4. Dividing an inequality by a positive number also does not change the inequality symbol. So I'm going to get left with x is greater than or equal to negative 20 divided by 4 is negative 5. So there is the domain for this function written as an inequality, but I need to write it in interval notation. The simplest way to do that is to sketch the graph first. So the only number I need to put on my number line is negative 5. I need x to be greater than or equal to negative 5. So those are all the numbers on the right of negative 5. Put an arrow on the end pointing to positive infinity. And since it has an equals on the negative 5, I use a square bracket. So my interval notation is just a contraction of this graph. So it's square bracket negative 5, comma, infinity. And remember, with infinity, you can only ever use parentheses because infinity doesn't have an endpoint. So here is my domain written in interval notation.